Welcome everybody to Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast. You're joining me here today for another episode of On Air, our live and unedited podcast that we record live on Twitter each Thursday night, chatting through all of the major news from team announcements and also for your Q&As for the week. This week, you've got me on there on the mics, and you've also got Bales DT from AFL Fantasy Fanatics joining me to have a great chat about all the important news and events before round 4. So you're going to throw straight to me now. Enjoy. G'day everyone listening. Thanks for coming along live. It's always very much appreciated. And welcome to round 4 team announcements live Free Kick on air with me, Liam, and Bales from AFL Fanatics, Fantasy Fanatics. How you going, Bales?
Good, thanks, mate. Looking forward to another weekend of AFLW and AFLW Fantasy. It's always good, and I know that it's an exciting time of the year because sort of the AFLW marrying up with the prelims and the grand final of the men's, which obviously it's a bit like I know for next week it'll be like a festival of footy almost over in Melbourne. So hopefully one of these days I can get over and to Melbourne during that weekend and watch a heap of games and go to a grand final. Hopefully it's the Crows actually making it. But no, looking forward to chatting ahead of this week, mate. How are you?
Yeah, look, not too bad. I'm definitely keen for the footy to start, and also very keen knowing that I've got next week I've got a public holiday on the Friday, which means that I'm probably going to go from, there's two games, so I live walking distance from Icon Park. There's 2 games at Icon Park on the public holiday Friday, and then the Bombers and Collingwood are playing like right next to the MCG at the AIA Centre for Collingwood on the Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So I'm keen as for next weekend, but I'm not going to let that detract from this weekend's teams, which, love a little segue, straight into tomorrow night's game. And I think this is the last one we're going to get dudded with at 5:05 and having to mad scramble our way to fix up anything after 5 o'clock team announcements. But it does mean that we've got Hawthorn and Melbourne. So coming in for Hawthorn are Talia Fellows and Bridget Deed, and out are Louise Stevenson and Akesh McCourt-Chut. And then for Melbourne, it's Amy Mackin in. And then, interestingly enough, Maddie Gay managed. And Maddie Gay was very popular in the preseason, in people's preseason teams. So I wonder how many teams she's still actually in. She's dropped a hunk of cash. Oh, my Lord. 18% of teams still have Maddie Gay. So
yeah, big one.
That is a large out, to say the least.
Yeah, large. Because I didn't think she's. I saw she's quite put in the preseason. I thought she's a good pick, but I thought, likes of Carney, Sheerans, like Evans, Heads, like the ones that coordinators, like people were talking about, I thought they'd be popping. But I noticed Maddie Gay was up there. So, yeah, that's something that coaches are going to have to deal with already.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those situations where I think I faded her just because I just wasn't sure that she had the kind of necessary ceiling with all of those players at Melbourne. And I think that's true of a lot of Melbourne players kind of in their midfield and halfbacks. Like, 1 week it might be all right, but there's that many people that can score well. It's, Mithen, West. You've got multiple forwards. It's definitely a tough group to break into. What I was actually just going to try and pull up is how many teams inside the top 1 and 5K actually still have Maddie Gay. Because that's going to be a serious issue for people if they've still got her. So, Maddie Gay, let's have a look. Maddie Gay, so is in 60 teams in the top 1K. Or is that, no, that's 6 teams. In 6 teams in the top 1K and 100, maybe 30 in the top 2K. So there are a few people out there that are probably scrambling at this point.
Yeah, so not too many.
No, not too many. Now, in terms of the ins, I would say great that we've got a 300k rookie. We've got Amy Mackin, who's the sister of Bly Mackin, who came in last year, both out of Ireland. Now, Bly came in with a good pedigree, but Amy has won now multiple, I think, best player awards or have been best player for her team multiple times. She's highly regarded over in Ireland. And as a kind of forward type player, having watched a little bit of her highlights, I don't know if they're as, game breakingly, awe-inspiring as what we saw from Vicky Ward last year, but definitely looks like she'll be a very competent player. I think as a 300k player to pick, it's not an outrageous choice, to be honest. It's not like Melbourne have a lot of injuries that they're trying to fill because Alyssa Bannon has been named. So I think if you're looking for a 300k rookie forward, she's definitely an option. And if I was, there is a trade plan that I'm doing where I would bring in Amy Mackin, but I would really love if the game was at 7 so that I could make any late changes from 5 o'clock teams. But not a bad player to pick at all. In terms of Hawthorn, I don't think either of their outs are particularly impactful. A name that's been popular to discuss this week is Christy Stratton. Have you got many thoughts on her at all, Bale?
Yeah, so a few people asked me about her on the Twitter space last week before the game, and I wasn't sold. And you made the point of Tamara Smith coming back in, and that would push her a little bit out. And so last week, if you still picked her, you'd be pretty happy because she still scored 78. That's back-to-back 70s, but obviously, and it's built on the back of tackles. She was the top tackler last week, 12 tackles the week before that as well. But she's now 686, and I think it's that awkward price where you're probably going to want her to make a bit more cash, like maybe a couple $100K to be able to be almost a straight swap for one of these maybe forward premiums or even going up to one of the top ones. But I feel like it's just she's in that awkward price now. If you got her last week, great. I think it's probably past you, so I'd probably be looking at other options unless that could like that. Like that's all you can get to. But even just having a look, what's like Zali Goldsworth? Like Zali Goldsworth is 682. So I would personally rather her.
Yeah. Yes. This is actually a question that I've been chatting with some of the guys from the Cousins podcast who did their first AFLW bit of content this week. I don't know if people have listened. I found it very entertaining. Would recommend. Interestingly enough, got a break-even of only 35, so we'll make nearly 70k if she scores another 60 this week. I don't know if that's going to be possible because if I'm Hawthorn, I'm putting my first choice midfielders in there. And interestingly enough, as much as she scored well last week, she did actually see her dip, nearly halving basically of her CBAs from the week before where she was an 80% midfielder. And particularly for Melbourne as well, where there isn't a natural tag target for her to run with, which is why she had such a high CBA count in that Western Bulldogs game.
Yeah, is it maybe Kate Hoare? Does she maybe try and follow her around?
Like maybe, but I would be like I don't know if you'd necessarily run a tagger for a 20-30% CBA player.
Yeah, good point.
So that is the first game. Moving on to Saturday's games, we've got a lovely bit of bright and early Canberra content for everybody. We've got GWS and Adelaide. 11:05.
So another about 10:35 for me. Bloody hell, it's going to be early. And imagine the people over in Perth that want to get up for it far out.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't tried to make this a Perth game and get West Coast to get up at 4 a.m. to make it to the game. So the outs for Greater Western Sydney are Alicia Eva. Interestingly enough, it is not Elise Parker, who has clearly passed her fitness test, which I don't know, Bales, if you were watching that game live, but she looked in a lot of pain. And it's never good when you see that and then they're testing ACL stability. So she's managed to make it up for the game. And then in Eva's place, they've named Caitlin Miller. Have they named her on the field? Why is it that I now can't even see her name at all? I named her on the half-forward line. And then Adelaide, the outs are Steely Thompson, who's out with a back injury, which we chatted about on Sunday. And then Lisa Whiteley, has been named omitted as well. And then in Montana McKinnon and Denny Varnigan. So, interestingly enough, Montana McKinnon means that probably see a bit more Jess Allen forward, which is very unfortunate because I think GWS Rucks against GWS is the best matchup in the game now.
Yeah.
After the performance that Gabby Seymour put together last week, and then one Laura Gardner knocking down Brisbane as the toughest matchup for midfielders. But interestingly enough, Denny Varnigan is a 300k player who's, I think she's had 3 or 4 seasons before, hasn't played in each of the last 2, so he's priced at 300k. I believe she's been named, I believe she's a midfielder. Would you be going there if you were looking for a 300k midfielder this week?
I would, personally. I was looking at it last week, and it would have been good if she was named last week because I would have been able to afford perfect trades this week. So I was 7k off of a couple of trades I wanted to do, but I went Caitlin Pope instead, who went okay, and we'll get to the Port game later on and talk about her. But yeah, I think she's a good option. I think she's got the experience. She's not a little bit an older player. I think 31, so she's not going to be a rookie and come in and sort of be overawed by anything. She's obviously played the Crows for I can't remember exactly how many games she's played, but she's obviously played before. So I think if you're getting a 300k player with experience, I think it's a good move, and she'd be my pick of the sort of 300k players, I guess, if you're looking for a player in utility.
Yeah, so she's played actually in all of the first 5 seasons. Averaged maybe 10 touches. If my memory serves me, not a great fantasy scorer. I've just got like averages in the 40s and 30s. So not exactly a particularly amazing fantasy scorer. I think part of the reason why that she's probably been picked is she has played a bit of a defensive role before, according to Will, and I think with the out of Stevie Lee Thompson, that's probably indicating that, unsurprisingly, Adelaide are short of defenders. And funnily enough, again, Chelsea Randall has been named at centre-half back, which is, a shock twist for all those that were keeping their ears to the ground in the preseason.
She's dropped a lot, like 381k Chelsea Randall's dropped this year. So I guess probably the question I ask you is when Sarah Allen and a few of these other players come back, she's a discounted premium to be looking at, I'd imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And to be honest, I think it might actually just be watching the games and just see if there's any kind of subtle role changes. Maybe another forward drops back, because I think that Adelaide's going to try everything to kind of cover that hole and then free Randall up to be a mid forward more towards the back end of the season when they're really looking to get through games strongly and compete for a top 2 spot.
Yeah, and then the other question I just had for you as well. What do you reckon, Lister? Does she go to someone because sort of? I don't know if Hatchard or Marinoff are sort of necessarily good matchups for Listers because of Hatchard's endurance and like her marking prowess. And Marinoff's obviously just a beast in the midfield. So does she go to anyone? Maybe does she go to Chelsea Randall or something? I don't know.
I would say that if they're going to bother putting Annalise Lister in at CBAs, they will put her on Anne Hatchard. Because I know Anne Hatchard's like an endurance beast, but part of what you're actually doing it for is to stop a bit of her kind of stoppage game as well.
Yeah.
And also she gets a lot of her possessions as this kind of secondary spread player from a stoppage. So part of it is like pushing her off her running lanes and then stopping her, allowing her to kind of get to that next spot after, a Marinoff has flicked it out, or a Tia Charlton or a Ponta. Because it was Ponta and Hatchard that were working really well together at CBAs against Essendon. I still think that if they're going to bother with Lister in the CBAs, they will go to her.
With that,
my issue with GWS is just that far out that team cannot decide what it's doing. We've finally got the CBA numbers this week. They are ridiculous if you have a look at this 3-game spread they've had.
Yeah. Who does Liam get more frustrated with, St Kilda or Giants?
Oh, no, St Kilda. It's not even close. At least it's GWS. They don't around too much. But, yeah, 1 week it's Jodie Hicks in round 2 is a 45% CBA midfielder. Next week she's at 0%, but she's taking more kick-ins than Tani Evans. I can't get a read on it. The problem there, though, is that I do actually really like Zali Goldsworthy, and less so Nicola Barr now because of her price. I think she's much closer to fully priced. But Zali Goldsworthy at below 700k, when I'm pretty sure she came into the season a fair bit higher than that. I think that's a really interesting spot to go to if you're really searching for a forward under 700k. If you are running I know that there are a fair few people in the top 1,000 that are running Lily Postlethwaite as their kind of lowest price player on field. And if you're looking to make multiple fix-ups this week, I really don't mind Postlethwaite as an option. Nor do I mind Christy Stratton. I just think long-term I trust the talent of Goldsworthy more.
Yeah. Would you be steering clear as well of Hatchard with the potential tag this week and maybe looking at her next week?
I think I'm a little concerned about her tagging. Well, I think they're Gold Coast next week, which is even worse.
Yes.
Yeah, they're Gold Coast on the Sunday. That is, of all players that I think we've seen now that are best placed to tag
Hatchard.
Yeah. Lucy Single's the one.
Exactly, yeah.
Not done for size, not done for endurance, not done for speed. And like I said it on the pod, but Lucy Single is not an amazing midfielder per se, but she does enough that she'll punish you. She'll get meters gained if you don't pay attention into her going the other way. So, and I think that's as well part of the reason why I don't think List is a clamped down tag, because I just don't know if she's damaging enough with the ball. But so at the moment, I'm trading Lister out. I cannot put myself through another experience like the last 2 weeks, which is a late out and then one of the most difficult to watch games in a long time. Just going, how are you nowhere near the ball? Or how are you always the third player to get to the tackle?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Moving then on to the next game, we've got Carlton and Richmond, which I reckon this is the most impactful player named for the week, and that's for Carlton. So Jen Lawson-Tavern is out, but Karen Peterson is in and has been named at halfback. Then for Richmond, Jess Hosking out, Sarah Darcy injured, and in are Stella Reid and Poppy Kelly. Now, the Peterson news, it's the fact that she's named at halfback that really kills everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's a little bit like we have seen team sheets, especially in the AFL, where it's like people named everywhere, and that's maybe not where they play. Is it Keely Skep? Hasn't she been playing more forward of late? And she's named at full back.
She's named at full back. So, yes, that to that degree, I think you're just flipping Amelia Villado and Keely Skep.
Yeah. So the fact Pearson, because she is a defender, she's been named the back line. It's a little bit concerning, but I still think that she'll play. I still think she'll play a wing-ish. Like wing-ish, maybe going to some CBAs every now and again. Sort of. I'm holding Cordner personally for one more week to see how she goes, because I still think she can make a little bit of cash just based on, I don't know what a break-even is exactly, but I feel like I want to hold her for 1 week because we know that she can score well. And if she scores poorly, I guess, I don't know if there are going to be too many people moving her on, whereas I guess if you move her on, it could be a bit of a pod play that could actually work for you. So are you moving on Harriet Cordner this week, or?
It would be a play that I would absolutely be doing if I didn't have Lister in my side still.
Yeah.
That's my issue.
Yeah.
If I didn't have Annalise Lister, Harriet Cordner would be someone on the chopping block, and it's also made worse by the fact that Richmond are the hardest team for defenders to score against. In terms of looking at the matchup she'll get, I'm really concerned by the idea that because Jen Lawson-Tavern is out, she is going to have to run around after Katie Brennan all day.
Yeah.
And that is not a high-scoring
So
that is the issue.
If people out there probably got the decision of maybe going Cordner to a Daisy Darcy, Emma Carney if they didn't have her, Isla Sheeran, Tani Evans, someone in defence, or going a Britt Benici or Bree Davey to a Rowbottom, Prasparkas, Hatchard, Marinoff, someone in that sort of area, what way would you be going? So I think that's probably what people may be going to be deciding between.
Yeah, I think getting off Cordner because she's 100% owned is probably the more important thing this week, because I also don't think that if you've got a Davey and a Benici, I don't think they've got a bad matchup this week.
Yeah, St Kilda's, I think they'll go both okay, I think.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it later, but I think even if Davey plays forward, we saw her do it last week when she was getting tagged, when she was getting tagged and had done nothing to half time. She spent a whole bunch more time up forward and still made her way to the second highest score on the ground.
As Will said, playing forward and getting tagged for an 88, and she's the second highest score on the ground. If that's a sort of a down game, a low scoring game for her, then what's she going to do this week?
Yep. It's one where I think it is coordinate out if you do have the ability to do that. She's still got a break even of 60. Now she's priced at 69.5 and has an average of 72.5 basically. So still a little bit of value there. I just don't know if that 90 that she had against North Melbourne is there again. I think if you were holding her, I'm hoping for 60.
Yeah,
that's
kind
of what I'm hoping for. But I also think that, it could go really poorly. I'm really just hoping that Carlton decide they need to go into ball control mode and start to chip it around down back. And hopefully what Peterson will do down there will be kick it to Cordner more. But that is some wishful thinking on my end more than it is a prediction. Now, in terms of Richmond's team, I really don't think there are that many differences this week. I note, though, that Charlie Wicksteed, who was a 300k player who came in last week, has held her spot in the side. So it's been named on a wing. And off the top of my head, I also think she got a few CBAs as well. If you're looking for someone who has now shown they've got a little bit of job security by getting picked for a second week, but hasn't moved out of range, I don't think she's a bad option because I'm pretty sure she's at below 320k.
Yeah, so I'm just...
Yeah, she's at 314.
Yeah.
And actually looked okay and had only 2/3 time on ground, but laid a few tackles, and that score is still impacted as well by a couple of free kicks against. So if you're looking for someone who's overage, so she's 21, but has shown the fact that she's held her role for an extra week. I don't think that's a bad play, particularly because Ellie McKenzie doesn't look like she's coming back in anytime soon.
Yeah.
Or at least the indication it's 2 to 4 weeks still. So probably a little bit of job security there. Now, another player for Moreira's Magic, if you're really looking for someone who is very cheap at the moment, Sarah Hosking is ludicrously cheap. And is only averaging in the 30s, but I think she's going to get a bunch more midfield time given the outs for Richmond. So that's just a name that I'm just throwing out there if you're really going to take a stab at something. But outside of that, I don't think Richmond is overly interesting. I'm not suggesting that people should bring in Mon Conti because I still just don't believe long-term that she's a high scorer.
She's one of those, again, people that listen to the men's podcast. She's a better real life player, and we know how good she is than a fantasy player. Very much like it's a little bit similar to like your LDUs, your Chad Warners, guys like that are very, very good midfielders in the comp. And I think Mon Conti is in the upper echelon in midfielders compared to, I guess, like a Chad Warner and that, because they're probably just a little bit below. But I just think, she's not.
I think Chad Warner is a great comparison because she can go missing at times, and then other times just moves in a way that's completely different, and she's extremely damaging on the scoreboard. Now, do I think it's because Richmond are looking to funnel her the ball? Absolutely, but she's a nice kick. She does mark the ball well in the forward 50, and she's an incredible burst player, can put together some 30-second patches where she scores a lot of points and gets a lot of touches. But I think for fantasy long term, she does go missing every now and then, which puts a cap on her ceiling.
Yeah.
And also doesn't tackle enough.
Yeah.
I think it's the main thing.
If you look at all the big midfielders, Garner, Bowers, Marinoff, like the Sparkus, Robon, they're all heavy tacklers. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the way you really kind of show yourself to be a level above in the fantasy game. Now, moving along then to Port Adelaide and Geelong. Got another impactful in this week. It's not for Port Adelaide with Maddie Kerrick. And Maggie McLaughlin has been omitted. And then the big name that's in is Beck Webster for Geelong, and Brooke Plummer has also been named, and Crockett Grills and Liv Fuller has been omitted. Beck Webster was the player that I was dreading coming in. I cannot believe the football gods have done this. There was 3 players who were out to start the season that could really impact the formation of my fantasy team. And they were Karen Peterson, Beck Webster, and Jenna Bruton. And they've all come back in the same week, which is just cruel and unusual punishment, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So for those of you who weren't playing or watching as much last year, Beck Webster is an inside CBA midfielder. And quite often, the player that gets pushed out as a result is a very relevant name in the higher ranked teams in Nina Morrison. Now, thankfully, it's a good matchup this week with Port Adelaide, who are relatively easy to score against off the top of my head. I'll just pull up Jaden's scale of hardness. Yeah, they're a light green team. But unfortunately, it does mean that the CBA run of Nina Morrison is no longer guaranteed. Now, I know that I've got bigger problems, and I think almost all teams in the top 5,000 have Harriet Corden issues, both with matchup and then the returning players this week. What are you thinking? Like, how long do you reckon the leash is for Nina in your side now that Webster is back? Would you be going super early and getting her out now and sidewaysing to a unique kind of premium, like a Too Good or a Tig, or are you just seeing what this role looks like?
Well, I've actually looked at potentially moving this week because my forward line I haven't got Apostle Swate or anyone like that on the field. I've got Morrison, Phillips, Malloy, Gardner, and Roberts. So I got the same. I've half considered going down from a Morrison to a Goldsworthy, pocketing in, and that's instead of going a Benici to a Ty Smith in the midfield. And using that cash then to go like a Benici up to a Roy Bottle Prespas and then going Lister up to a better defender. Like that's something I've looked at. I think the Port Adelaide matchup is what makes it tricky because I think even without the CBAs, I think that she could still score pretty well against Port. I still think she'll have a few CBAs. She might be 20%, maybe 15%, but obviously, as you said, she's not going to be that sort of half and half or more CBAs. So,
she was 100% last week.
Yeah,
she's averaging over 2/3 this season.
Yeah,
and has scored, 97, 86, and 99. I think it's a bold play to go early. I think it is the fact that it's a good matchup this week that makes it a little bit easier. Now, Geelong's matchup next week, off the top of my head, isn't great. Yeah, they got Melbourne next week.
So you can do it next week.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way you need to be thinking. And, I think at that point, we'll probably get some indication of what the kind of price cycle is going to do now that we'll get a better indication on like a full cycle of players. You might be able to find some slightly underpriced targets in the defence. So I think you probably need to be considering where you're trading out Nina next week. It's just a question of up or down, based on kind of how many premium midfielders you've got, which is kind of all of these ins are informing the reason why I'm hesitant to go with a Ty Smith into my midfield option because I'd be concerned I'd get stuck with it for too long.
Yeah,
with potential role changes incoming with players coming back. So I've pivoted my trade slightly in my current trade plans, but not necessarily set in stone. In terms of Port Adelaide, I don't think there's been too many changes this week. I think all owners would love to see a better performance from Erin Phillips because she, got eked her way to a 70, put together a goal and then a couple of kicks and a tackle in the fourth quarter to really put together a tidy score after having had some very quiet moments. I know we've just talked about Nina Morrison out, but how long do you reckon you're holding Erin Phillips for? Do you think she's got that 90 that we saw in round one, or is she on a limited lease?
I'm not. I'm still a little bit bullish on Erin Phillips. Like last week, she still had the 20 disposals. It was just the one mark for her that was missing, and we know that she can rack up those marks when it's going well. And I don't think Geelong are going to necessarily tag an Erin Phillips. They normally go head to head with the midfields they come up against. So I think Erin Phillips could get back to a decent score this week. And so she's got Geelong this week, but I think after that she's a decent. She's got West Coast the week after.
West Coast.
Then she's got Sydney, and then they've got North Melbourne is probably the tough one. So for at least the next 3 weeks, I think she's still a hold for the time being. I think I'd almost be more concerned potentially next week about Nina Morrison over Phillips if we sort of what we're projecting with Becky Webster back could create. Yep. So
I would be suggesting that kind of all Nina Morrison holders don't just scoreboard watch this week. I think it's definitely going to be necessary to actually watch that game to see where Nina and Beck Webster are both playing, and just maybe double checking. Don't kind of be thinking, Nina scored more points, therefore she's fine. I'd expect coming off a hamstring. I don't know if Webster's going to have the biggest game, but yeah, it's an interesting little conundrum. I agree with you as well. I think Phillips's run coming up is part of the reason why, even after a bad round 2 performance, I was willing to hold and say no. She kept the CBA role, and I think she's got a great run coming up after this week. So it's a hold for me, but I don't know if it's going to be an easy watch. So moving along to Sunday's games. Now, in terms of the ins we've got Sydney and West Coast. The ins for Sydney, Lauren Zaghetti has been named on the ground, and then on an extended bench, they've named Paige Shepherd, Jade Anthony, Alana Woodward, and Eliza Vale. And then outs are Montana Berylson and Montana Ham. In terms of what we've got from West Coast, surprisingly, Shanae Davison back in. And then on an extended bench, you've got Abigail Bushby, Sarah Lakai, and Mackenzie Webb. And then out is Emily Elkington, who was knocked out by Jen Lawson-Tavern. And that's why Jen is out for 2 weeks. So, in terms of what has changed with these teams, frustrating for all people that had Shanae Davison and have traded her out last week. And I'm sure would have loved a nice little 1 week red dot hold so that she could start generating cash again. Outside of that, I don't think any of the ins and outs this week really do impact West Coast and Sydney.
I think
outside of that, I think my biggest question is, if you're an Emma Swanson holder, are you concerned that Tanya Kennedy, the Swiss Army knife, might get thrown in as a tagger this week?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned there because Tanya Kennedy has been named on the ball and, funny enough, next to Swanson on the team sheet. So it is a bit concerning that could happen. With Zaghetti coming back, do they maybe roll Gardner, Malloy and Zaghetti in there, or do they go more for Kennedy to tag Swanson? So it's going to be an interesting watch with that midfield mix. But the other one that from Sydney that is sort of a big watch is for anyone that's got Ali Morfitt out there. If Lakai's not named, Morfitt could go bananas this week.
Yes. Well, I actually think that, unfortunately, for Morfitt owners, great pick, like elite stuff. I know Dossie did, and he was crowing very early about it, which is fair enough. Unfortunately, Matilda Schultz has kind of really dulled the impact of kind of going the rookie ruck strategy, because as good as Morfitt is, for Schultz to have been that cheap,
they're going that well,
still average that much, it really has helped. And even this week with the cushy as ever West Coast Eagles ruck matchup, really like men's, like women's teams. Unfortunately for Morfitt owners, Matilda Schultz has another extremely easy matchup with Erin Hall.
Yeah, and
who have dropped Liv Fuller.
Yeah, and looking at here, who would have thought start of the year that Matilda Schultz would be averaging more than Bree Moody, Alice Edmonds, Gabby Seymour, Talia Hickey? I don't think any of us would have said that she would have gone this well. So she's been, I know, as you said, but if you do have Morfitt though, this could be a week where she puts up a big ceiling score if Lakai is not named.
I don't think Lakai is going to get named. It sounded like they were trying to get her up for injury, and I would be very surprised if she does play. Even then, it's still an easy matchup if Lakai does play. But I also think Matilda Schultz may actually outscore Ali Morfitt this week.
That could happen. And then I guess any time we talk about Sydney, there's one player that's always going to be brought up. We always got to bring up Laura Gardner in some capacity. And sort of the question with her is this week is that I think a few people now are rolling around with a few red dots around the place. And the fact that Kiara Bowers plays after Laura Gardner, and a lot of people have got Murphy actually plays the same time as
this is the big problem.
But if someone's got a red dot from Gold Coast, Bulldogs, Collingwood, St Kilda, Essendon or Freo, is there a play you could put Laura Gardner VC? Or if you don't have a loophole, could you put a captain?
So I think she's absolutely a player as a VC. She's absolutely a player as a VC to the point where there's part of me that goes, Ariana Hetherington, Alana G, take the week off. Just take a spell this week. Come back next week, nice and refreshed. Allow me to use you as my VC option because at the moment, I'm kind of stuck because I'm looking to trade out Lily Postlethwaite, who plays at the same time, and I don't currently have any red dots.
Yeah.
Which means that I'd have to make the call beforehand to trade in a red dot from a player who plays after, and I'd ideally like to be picking a red dot that I actually think would play at some point this year, and there's not a large number of options.
Yeah, Huntington was a good option early, but now it's like there's not one that's probably going to play, so you have to bring in someone that you're banking on they're probably not going to play.
Yeah, like I could probably do a little bit more searching, and I also want it to be, for me, it's got to be a forward. And then you add in, I prefer them to be playing, more games on Sundays, and it just becomes very difficult to actually find someone that ticks all the boxes. Yeah. But I'm probably going to do a little bit more research on that one, and maybe I do find someone that I can trade in because, I think the concept of a player who has a 15% market share going up against one of the easiest teams to score against, who does not have someone who can run with her sufficiently, is ridiculous. 151 against Brisbane is possibly one of the most ridiculous fantasy feats of all time.
Yeah, I don't know if you've done your captain's article or if you're doing that this week, but if you're not, where would Gardner be placed in your sort of top 10? Is she top 5?
She's in my top 5. In my draft that I've got at the moment, my little skeleton, she's inside the top 5.
Ooh.
Yeah. It could be a large one this week.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's it for Sydney and West Coast. Moving along to North Melbourne and Brisbane. So, North Melbourne have named on an extended bench, I believe. Yeah, all of them on an extended bench. They've named Jenna Bruton, Kate Shearlaw, Lucy Burke, and Liz McGrath. And they've omitted Eilish Considine. So, she's got one game and then been kicked to the side. Now, Brisbane have named on an extended bench Caitlin Wendland, Ella Smith, Kiara Hillier, and interestingly enough, Taylor Smith has also been named, even though she's come in under a bit of an injury cloud. And out, they've got Dakota Davidson suspended. Now, this is probably going to be, I'd say probably, it is going to be the game of the week.
Yep.
It's unfortunately going to be going up against a game where I'm not sure many people will be watching it for the actual game, but the fantasy heads will all be wanting to watch Sydney and West Coast. But Kangaroos and Brisbane, and then it's going to be the clash of the Titans this week with Kathy Svar going up head-to-head against Jazz Garner. But the other thing we've got to talk about is Jenna Bruton has been named on an extended bench. I'm expecting her to play. If you're a Riddell holder, like I am...
Yep, same here.
Do you have many thoughts about holding Riddell this week with what is a terrible matchup for scoring and then also the return of another inside CBA midfielder?
Yeah, it's if Calvin was here, we'd be getting him to do his the alarm sound because there you go. There's a makeshift one. It's not actually. Do I have? Hang on. There you go. There's the soundboard.
Yeah.
It is a worry. I'm just having a look. But the funny thing is that if anyone sort of looks into past games against the same opposition, which I think it's a little bit less relevant in AFLW, but Ash Riddell has been the top scorer in the last 2 games against Brisbane. So in the 2 games last year. So was it 2? No, sorry, the 2 seasons from 2022. The first season from last year, she scored 117 in the media, and they got beaten pretty.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Badly by 36 points. And the closer game, she top scored with 93. So,
interesting.
I don't know.
I hadn't actually looked at that, but I didn't have to look at that stat to still know that the reason I am concerned is the fact that Laura Gardner scored 151, incredible. What interests me this week more is the fact that it came when they hard tagged Malloy.
Yeah.
So wherever Malloy went, anywhere up the ground, someone was hard running with her, and then at every stoppage, Kathy Spark was bodying her. Now, that probably freed up to some degree Gardner to score big because she wasn't getting any attention. She was just running wherever she liked. And I think that's also probably because Brisbane knew they didn't have to put that much pressure on to still win a game very comfortably. I'm still concerned by how restrictive Brisbane can be to midfielders overall. But it would have actually probably been easier for me this week if Gardner hadn't gone big, because now I'm tossing up my trades, because I'd always thought that, this matchup, particularly if Bruton's back, would be the time to jump off.
Yeah. It's the fact that Gardner and Riddell they do have that sort of similar way. They can pop up for those marks. They can get those tackles, especially if you're not doing what Riddell was doing. So last week, we're just sort of trying to play that sort of in front at the stoppage of Georgia Prasparkas. So Garner being tagged is going to free up Riddell. But as you said, Bruton being named, I think it's still probably safer to jump off because she's so unique. She's most unique of sort of any of those pre-mids. I think she's about that 6%. And as you said, she's done what she needed us to and probably better. We probably weren't expecting her to go 150 that early on. And she was averaging, 120 on the first 2 weeks, 105, 151. So then she got the 79 last week. But again, would that have been bigger? Would that have been better if it wasn't for that sort of stoppage, sort of weird stuff going on? So is that a better score in another game? Like, so many question marks.
Yeah, it really is a lot of question marks. I still think I'm going to trade her out this week just because I'm a little concerned, and I can sideways her effectively to another premium midfielder. So I can sideways, and currently what I'm looking at doing is sidewaysing her to Rowbottom, because I think Rowbottom long term has a more sustainable route to scoring. But I'm also in the back of my mind thinking, well, Rowbottom had 2 amazing games to start the season. As it turns out, she probably did it against the 2 easiest teams, because she hit Carlton and West Coast.
Yeah.
For a 140 and a 120. So, yeah, many conundrums this week, and I've still got 24 hours before I need to make my first lockout. And the moment I've got Riddell out, just because I do think that the return of Bruton and then also this matchup overall is pretty alarming to me. But overall, though, I actually think the Kangaroos are going to win this game.
I think so, yeah.
I think that Davidson out after they've lost Wardlaw and they've lost Bodie and Taylor Smith
and Emily Bates
is not healthy. And Bates. I was just thinking like
players,
but yeah, that's fair. That's a fair enough point. I just don't think they've got the firepower to hang with them this year. But yes, that game is going to give me some sleepless nights. Moving along then to Essendon at Fremantle at Windy Hill. Now, the Bombers have a couple of outs. They've named out Daria Bannister, who was concussed, and then Leah Cutting has been omitted. So that was a 1 week play for the ruck matchup. And then in Joanne Doonan. Now, yes, I think these are all on extended bench. Joanne Doonan, Alex Morecambe.
Yep.
Alex Morecambe, Danny Marshall, and Alana Barber.
Yeah, they're all on the bench.
They're all on the extended bench. Now, Fremantle, they have no outs, and their ins are Pip Seth. Where else? Who is Neild? I don't know their first name.
Nikki
Neild. Nikki Neild and Michaela Tuhakarena. And they've all been named on an extended bench.
So Seth's named on the wing.
Seth has been named on the wing. All right. So, in terms of the impacts of those ins and outs, I don't think there's that much to really discuss here. I do think it's interesting that the Bombers have named Steph Kane on the wing and Jackie Vott in the midfield, because I have a feeling they're a bit concerned about their size inside. Particularly going up against the tackle matchup this week. Now, What do we think Turbo does?
Well,
what's your prediction for Kiara Bowser's score?
Well, I'm not going to say stealing out. I'm going to sort of shout out to Mel, obviously, from the free kick. Obviously, back to Bowersness. I think it's going to be bounce back to Bowersness. I know that she wasn't terrible last week, but 104 is not, and then only 8 tackles is not really what we're sort of accustomed to seeing with Kiara Bowers. You mentioned on the pod, smaller ground. Essendon are not going to be like Hawthorn, where they're going to be second to the ball. The Bombers, I think, it's going to be a lot more even. If not, Bombers are going to try and get first the ball. I think so. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for Bowers to get tackles. She got her touches last week, a lot more clearances, as you mentioned as well. I think this could be a big bounce back week. It'd be good if Jaden could get it up. I'd love to know what Bowers does, removing the start of last year because it was sort of affected by limited preseason with the whole COVID stuff. But it'd be interesting to see what Bowers does when she has single-digit tackles, what she does the following week and what her score is, because I'd say that they're probably pretty big the next week.
Yeah, and I can pull that up now. I think the thing that I'm taking most comfort from is that in the Bombers' first 3 games, we've seen Batesy and Tamara Smith had double-digit tackles. Off the top of my head, I think the best tackling performance of the year so far for Tiana Smith. And then last week Noffy had 15
Hatchard
tackles.
9, yeah.
Yeah, so
they both went over 120.
I think that tells you the Bombers are an easy team to score against if you like to tackle, because they're actually for an expansion side, they've got a very competent set of inside midfielders.
Yeah.
All who are fully capable of going and getting the ball themselves. They're not small. They're not going to get completely blown off the ball.
Yeah.
And G. Nansgorn and Maddie Prespakis are, I'd say, up there at the moment for some of the most tackled players.
Yeah.
So just having a look at Bowers, last time she had single-digit tackles. So setting aside last season, going to have to go back a little bit. Not off an injury. She had a 92 and then she came back with 111.
Okay.
So that's not a massive input, but I don't even think it's necessarily that she had a bad score last week. I expected to improve. I just think that game was weird.
Yeah, it was, as you said, very odd game. It was hot. It was just, as you said, Freya went to the ball first a lot of the time. There wasn't as many stoppages and sort of places for Bowers to sort of get going. There's a lot of sort of switching from one side. Freya was sort of going from they'd mark or intercept in the back pocket, they'd then switch it and it would just sort of completely miss Bowers, and they'd go and they'd use a Craig or someone like that to sort of bounce along the wings. So I expect to be a different game this week.
Yeah, and having now actually gone to that game live at Windy Hill, it is very small. So I do expect it to be quite contested as a result.
And for all those coaches like myself, and I think you said you jumped on Bowers last week, and a lot of other people did. Those people that didn't jump on her and probably maybe might not go this week, they might go for Garner looking at the scores. I think that the people that got Bowers are going to be rewarded this week.
I'm very much hoping that's the case. And if you ask me if I'm my best case scenario, or my most likely scenario, I think it's back to what we saw at the very least against Collingwood with a 130. Yeah. I think that's what I'm kind of stealing myself for. But obviously, I'd love a little bit more than that, given what I paid for her. In terms of other players in this game, I don't necessarily think there's that much going on. In terms of what happened yesterday, I expect Joanne Doonan to be the replacement for Daria Bannister, but hasn't got a great ceiling to her scoring. Fremantle are a very easy matchup, I think, across most lines to score against. Yes, unless you're a ruck, so don't pick Steph Wales. But if you've got Bombers this week, it's probably a good week. I know that at the moment I was trading out Paige Scott in Moreira's Magic, but I'm potentially reconsidering that on second thoughts, given that it's a +6 matchup for Fremantle for forwards. All right, moving then along to St Kilda and Collingwood. So for the St Kilda Saints, they've got Renee Solitis omitted and then Janome Anderson concussed. You must have had some moments there, Bales, thinking, I've been here when she's concussed on 13.
Yeah.
you're hoping that no one made the same error.
Yeah, hopefully no one did.
And so they've got Ella Friend, Caitlin Matthews, Alice Burke, Erin McKinnon, and Rosie Dillon. Now, Collingwood have no outs. However, one of their ins is very interesting. So they've got Charlotte Blair in, and they've got Joanna Lynn has been named in the side as well. They've been named no one out. Interestingly enough, we have our first train-on player, who's been named in a squad for a Sunday game. Jessica Bates, who is, I think she won the Sandful Best and Fairest 2 years in a row, AFLW, and then was robbed of the VFLW Best and Fairest player at Collingwood. Collingwood have so many injuries that when it comes to naming a full 24, they don't have enough healthy people. So that should give you some sense of Collingwood's issues at the moment, and why is that we might be seeing some than others. 4 matchups overall this week. I think there's some very relevant midfielders in this game that are kind of all occupying that M4 through M4 and M5 space, because we've got Benici, Davey, and then also Tiana Smith. Interestingly enough, and this is something that I've seen people talking about on Twitter and on Discord, which is, what are we going to do about the fact that Bree Davies been named at half forward?
Yeah,
I know I have some thoughts, but Bales, I'll give you the floor first. Does it give you any cause for concern?
Not really. Bree Davies is she's captain. They've named Sheridan, Michaela Can, and Benici on ball. I expect Bree Davey to probably be there instead of maybe a Sheridan or a Can for like the CBAs. And yeah, she will spend a little bit of time forward, but I'm not concerned personally of her playing forward. I think a few people are probably looking at last week and going, she played a lot of time forward, not many CBAs. But I think that was, again, a little bit like Swanson the week before, where I think that they're trying to escape the Lucy single tag, and they thought, we'll try and put her forward in parts. And I think she moved back more into the midfield in the last quarter, and I think that was Bree Davies' best quarter. I think she had, I'm just pulling it up, exactly what she scored in the last quarter. She just had the 25 points, and then she had 26 in the third quarter, so she had a decent second half. So I don't know, yeah, so obviously it'd be interesting to see what you think, but I'm not too concerned personally.
No, I'm not too concerned either. It's just an unfortunate situation where I really do want to upgrade it and bring in kind of a top 5 premium into my midfield so that I can round out I've got Marinov and I've got Kiara Bowers. I'd really like a third kind of entrenched top 5er. And then I've got 3 players where they've got little flags for all of them and then reasons to like all of them. So I've got Benici, Riddell and Davey. I don't think that Davey being named at half forward is the problem. I think the bigger problem is, I also think there's a world where she not only plays forward to break a tag, she plays forward because, I don't know if you watched that game for Collingwood last week, but they sucked inside forward 50. They could not hit a target, and they were terrible kicking for goal. So there is part of me that just thinks, has some cause for concern that they might throw the magnets around a little bit and actually just use Bree Davies as a bit more of a marking target in the hopes that it can ignite something for a team that's lost 2 games and didn't look amazing against Gold Coast and then had a good half against Melbourne and then got absolutely steamrolled. That is it's my word of warning. I'm probably going to hold her, but you know, for people that are also in the same position as me and considering trading her out, and you do hold, you were warned.
Yeah, well, what about Benici? Because a lot of people are saying if you're trading one, who are you trading? And that's probably one of the common questions for the week. And if you look at like a Britt Benici, so she had a quiet first quarter last week, only having the 6 points, but she had a 30-point second quarter, a 41-point third quarter, then again a bit of a quiet last quarter, just the 14 points. And that's been a bit what she's done this year. It's been probably 2 good quarters, couple of bad, sort of quieter quarters. Is she one that you trade out before Bree Day, probably with the ceiling and probably still slowly working our way back to sort of playing 4 quarters at full tilt, or where are you leaning?
I think this is one where it is just a little bit what your team look like and what you could upgrade Benici to. because I do think that they sit in just slightly different price brackets, and I think the fact that Britt Bonici is a little cheaper and her consistency, and the fact that I just don't believe she's going to be tagged, really does de-risk her somewhat.
Yeah.
She can put together a really nice score basically in season 6 for those kind of first 7 games. If you kind of get rid of the injured score that she had, she was a 90s player, and in today's money with the extended games, that's basically 100. I think we're seeing her round back into form, but I do think there is some point to make that she doesn't have the same ceiling that Davey does. Now, I just don't know Davey first quarter, first half, because that was truly a ridiculous performance. And we haven't really seen that since then. In the kind of 2.5 games since, we haven't seen her just truly tear a game apart and score a whatever it was. What is it, like?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up. She had 38 in the first quarter against Melbourne, then 46, so 88 points. What's that? So she was, so what's that? Quick maths there. 78, 84 in the first half against Melbourne.
84 points. 84 points in that first half. She looked like she was on track for, an all-time score. I think that, there's a world where we probably don't see that ceiling again versus a Britt Bonici in both 6 and 5 had scores above 129, and then she's also had a 133, funnily enough, against St Kilda in season 6. And I think the big thing for her is that I really just don't think we're going to see a stinker score.
Yeah.
Because even so, she has a 5-game run, basically, one of her best 5-game runs in the middle of season 6. She goes 133, 89, 87, 75, 107 for an average of 102.7.
Yeah, so it's just one big score there.
There's one huge score, and then there's just no real floor scores either.
I feel like she's one that you trade. If you trade, she's going to be a little bit similar to when my thinking of trading Swanson last week. That I don't think. Again, she can. She's a good player. So of course she can. But I don't know if she's going to necessarily go 140 and you trade her out. It's not as likely anyway compared to maybe a Bree Davey or a Kate Hall like I bloody did a couple of weeks ago where they go.
Yeah, well, we didn't know Kate Hall had that ceiling.
Yeah, I didn't think she had an 84-point quarter ceiling either.
No, well, yeah, that will forever pain me. That first quarter was some of the most difficult watching footy I've ever had.
I didn't watch it deliberately.
And onto slightly less painful footy to watch. We've got our final game of the week. We've got Gold Coast and the Western Bulldogs. So let me just pull up the ins and outs. So Gold Coast have named in Ella Moora, Giselle Davis and Viv Sard. And then the Western Bulldogs have named out Daisy Bateman, Millie Brown and Bailey Hunt. Now, in terms of this game, we've got the Western Bulldogs who, I know it's a bit of a, we had the joke on the pod last season that they're the least relevant fantasy side. And then, as it turns out, Alice Edmonds was the pick of the year. Now, this version of the side, do we think that there's that many relevant names? Because I know that Maggie Gorham is someone that probably people are going to pick this week. I think she's got the lowest projected break-even. But in terms of premium or even mid I'm not that sold on anyone from the Western Bulldogs.
No, because you look at the ones that people would probably go to. You look at Ellie Blackburn. I think she's a very, very good player. It reminds you a little bit of a Mon Conti where she'll have big gains, but she'll also have games where she does go missing a little bit and will get some attention from opposition players. We've seen Alice Edmonds has had she had a great week 1, and that first half against Geelong was huge, but sort of since probably sort of from that third quarter onward, she's been quite quiet in the last few weeks. So I don't know if you're going her just yet. And then and then Katie Lynch, like we've said before, we're just can you trust Katie Lynch? I don't know if you can.
Can you? I don't
can't.
think you can, but in terms of just trying to pull up. So, I'm just trying to see whether or not there's anyone else on the injury list that might come back to help Katie Lynch, because I really do think that it just takes another premium, like key defender, basically. Okay, Millie Brown is the person. So if Millie Brown is back and playing right, as a key defender, maybe Katie Lynch gets freed up a little bit. And Gold Coast are a very, very good matchup for defenders. So for those of you who, again, like to not sleep that well at night, I think there is a world where you can make an argument for Katie Lynch, particularly now that she has come down a bunch of cash. So she's down 125k, priced at 710,000, which, to put it into context, is in a range of defenders where I think she's probably the highest potential scorer of them. She's probably got the biggest ceiling because she sits between Amy Smith and Charlie Thomas and Ella Heads, Jodie Hicks and Geordie Allen. So a very relevant section of names there. I just think that she has the potential to score 30 again.
I think if you're going Lister to Lynch, I don't see an issue with that because you're probably, at worst case, you're probably going to get the same score. But I think you've probably got more trust in Lynch than what you would with an Annalise Lister based on obviously what you saw last week and the laid out. So I think if you do that, I think it's fair enough. But I don't know if I'd be going. I wouldn't be going a Cordner to Lynch. I wouldn't be doing that.
No, and I would even then say I would be taking, if you haven't got Heads and Thomas, maybe then you can make the argument for Lynch. But I would say I'd prefer Heads or Thomas over Lynch because I think
I'd prefer Thomas out of those three for picking.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm looking at the moment. I'm looking Lister up to Thomas. Because I didn't start with Thomas, but she's now come down a fair bunch of cash. I still think she's going to take all the kick-ins. And I think, she's got that value in her, and I see her being at or around top 5. But, if you really want to take an out-there pick, I can't hate completely the idea of Katie Lynch because she's just got such a big ceiling.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the Gold Coast Suns, we've already talked about Daisy Darcy as being a potential in. I still think she's a really great option. She's actually one of the more traded players in this week, which is desperately disappointing that I now can't also join that train. It also is disappointing because I was really hoping that it would kind of ruin Will's mood a bit that I was trading in one of his unique players. Are you looking in that direction as someone to get in the next few weeks, or is this someone where you go, she's probably going to be a bit more too expensive by the time I actually get around to sidewaysing a Cordner, for example?
Well, I was looking to talk about the Gold Coast because as it currently stands, she's in for me this week. I'll be at the moment. I'm going Lister up to Daisy Darcy with my trades, which will probably. Actually, no, stop. Also my trades are going to be now just because we're on it. I'm looking at going a Britt Benici down to a Ty Smith to sort of get kicks because I don't have much cash on the bench. I've got Mia Bush, Caitlin Pope, Lily Postlethwaite, Erin Horse. So obviously Postlethwaite's a decent amount now and Erin Horse slightly going up and she's sort of good backup for if anything did happen to Schultz there. So I want a bit more cash gen. So going Benici down allows me to then go Riddell to at the moment I'm going Prasparkas over row bottom. I don't know if that's I've been tossing and turning between the two, and then I'm going Lister up to Daisy Darcy.
Yeah, nice. No, I can't hate that. I like all the ins. I just think that I'm chancing my arm a little bit on Prasparkas because I think that the Webster back in, and she is a more pressing need to tag every single week. She will get some form of stoppage attention. I don't know if we're going to see that 140 again.
Yeah, and
that's the same way that there was such a big announcement from Davey that she was back to full health that every team has gone, all right, well, let's strap on the tagger boots and throw someone in her at the stoppages. I think Prasparkas has shown now that she's an absolute game breaker and one of those must-stop players if you're looking to win. And North don't have a tagger, but you could see that at every stoppage, basically after that first quarter, it was like, all right, we really need to put a body on hard to stop her from just tearing us apart. And that did show in the fact she didn't get to that super ceiling score.
Yeah, it's a tough decision I'm looking at. So,
yeah. And then obviously can't talk about Gold Coast without talking about Lucy Single. She will probably end up tagging Ellie Blackburn. that will probably mean that Gold Coast win the game because, unfortunately, Western Bulldogs don't have a large amount of midfield talent to really break the game open if Blackburn has been shut down. So that is going to be unfortunate, but not that surprising given the way their team is constructed at the moment. Now, in terms of players that are named on an extent in this game that are relevant trade-in targets, they're almost all rookies. So Maggie Gorham is one name that I've already mentioned, and then Cara McCrossan, who played last week and is sitting on the extended bench. And then I'm pretty sure Ella Mora as well is, Ella Mora is a 300k forward also on an extended bench. So there's a few names out there for people to consider trading into.
And then you got Aurora Smith for the Dogs as well.
Oh, of course, yes, you've got Aurora Smith too. And in terms of, I think that might be it for basement price players. Yeah, Bailey Hunt's 406k. All right, well, made our way through all games. Now, there are a bunch of questions in response to the space on Twitter. We're not going to have a chance to get through all of them, unfortunately. One here that or maybe I'll just combine a few together. Thoughts on Claudia Gunjaka and Nat Grider?
Actually, that's one thing I noticed from the Geelong game last week. Gunjaka was everywhere. Like, she was just sort of racking up, but a lot of it was intercepts, and Geelong was switching the ball a lot as well. Like, they were going from one wing sort of and then getting Crockett Grills involved, but then going to the other end to get like a Michaela Bowen involved. So I think that she got 71 against the Dogs and an 80 against all of them. She got a 22 against Sydney in that middle game. So personally, I'm not going there. I don't think she's the option. If she was maybe under 500k, there's no name, but 629, you're probably rathering going up 100 odd k. I think I'd even still rather go with Geordie Allen if you're looking at someone there, or even going, as we said, Charlotte Thomas, Ella Heads, Katie Lynch. So I wouldn't be going then. Nat Grider, I know you've been a little bit more keener on her. It's sort of just what I've seen with Nat Grider is, again, she can go missing for big portions of the game, and in a way does remind me a bit of Katie Lynch, obviously different player, but just sort of can just pop out a 30 sort of when you're sort of least expecting it. So I'm not huge on either, but I think you're going Grider out of the two.
Yeah, and I think that they both have the capacity to really pop out a poor score. I think the reason I prefer Grider is partly because of her run coming up. It's basically all green for the next 4 weeks, and has got two of the easiest matchups kind of in weeks 3 and weeks 4 of that run. And North Melbourne are also a good game for defenders. And I think as well, Claudia Gunjaka had a great game, almost certainly freed up by the fact that she didn't have to play a role on Kate Shearlaw, who was a late out. So basically, probably game planned all week to play on Shearlaw, rocked up to the ground, and then finds out she's a late out and goes, well, I'll just do whatever I want now.
Yeah.
I'll just play roam free. Like, I'm playing now on Ellie Gavalis, for example. I can't even exactly remember who her matchup was.
I think, she's playing like Ruby Tripodi at times. In Considine, she went to a couple of times. Like, she's sort of almost like that, sort of doesn't have an opponent, sort of just going to whoever's near me, I'll just go to that player and sort of intercept.
I'll just go to them. And she's a former forward, reads the ball really well in the air, and has looked good as a defender. And I think long-term has some potential as an intercept player. I think it'll be tough to really see those ceiling scores when they do have Captain Megmac down there, who is also a very capable intercept defender and will pretty constantly put up 50s and 60s. But I think it's the fact that Grider is such a classy player, and we have seen kind of every week improve since she had that really stinky score around 1. But importantly, we now realise that it's because that Richmond matchup is really hard for defenders.
Yeah.
The way that they play, the speed and the way they lower their odds going inside 50, it's very hard for defenders to score in it. By the looks of it, they also play with a pretty high press, which stops a lot of the switching. So I do think I prefer Grider just for the pedigree. And I also think that if you were forced to hold her for a few weeks, I'd prefer her run versus
great.
Geelong, who, have two light reds, and then Richmond in 3 weeks. So those are my thoughts there. Now, funnily enough, there are actually 2 questions about Katie Lynch, clearly on people's mind at the moment. Okay, here's one for you. Chloe Malloy or Bonnie Toogood?
Far out, this is a tough one. I think Chloe Malloy goes big this week. I think that I'm not reading anything into last week. As we said, Cassie Vark is one of the best taggers in the comp. And as you said, it was probably more, didn't have to tag Malloy, but warming up for Jazz Garner this week. So, and the fact that she scored 4 behinds, if they're a couple of goals, that's a 70, and we're not looking at that as a dirty score anymore. So, and she's playing midfield still, so she's great. And then Bonnie Toogood has been sort of one of the players I've been most impressed with this season in just, even last week against the Crows, just the way that she was able to get up the ground, get involved with the play, put herself behind the ball. I'm honestly, the only thing I think splitting it is I think Malloy's cheaper. I'm just going to probably say Malloy just because probably the midfield role is better and she's cheaper. But I really like Bonnie.
Malloy's cheaper and match up this week.
Yeah, and that's probably why. But I really like Bonnie Toogood as a pod.
Yeah, I agree. But I am on board with Malloy. For all the reasons you just said, I just think that she's got the potential to be that 85, 90 player. And I do think that there's a world where Bonnie Toogood, does spend some more time up forward, and we don't see this run continue because this is not something that we've seen from her necessarily before.
Yeah.
This really is a big surprise, and I don't know, let's say, for example, the Bombers do run into some bad weather. I don't think she's scoring 109.
Yeah, agreed.
She might score close to 49.
Yeah, because those conditions
she's just not going to be around for the tackles.
Those conditions last week in the Adelaide Essendon game were perfect.
Oh, literally perfect for like a big forward who has a beautiful set of hands to take some absolutely beautiful marks. Just going to be tough to sustain. If I'm going to be really nitpicky, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe go one more question, and then we'll have a chat about our trades if we've made any changes since we started. But I'm actually going to throw it to Bit in that, who puts together the website that I use for a whole bunch of stuff, and it's been a fantastic addition to the game. The question here is, which two to trade in, Rowbottom and Roberts or Garner and Goldsworthy?
So it's Rowbottom and Roberts, and then Goldsworthy and who?
Garner.
So Garner, I think it's Rowbottom and Roberts. I know that people are going to go, look, Garner's a step above. Look at this. You said on the pod, you guys talked about it at length. I'm concerned with that tag this week, and it's only for 1 week for Garner, but I think Rowbottom can go big against Bulldogs, and I would rather Roberts over Goldsworthy, and yeah, I just think this could be a lower week, so I'm going Rowbottom and Roberts.
Yep, I agree. I think of all the matchups where you're likely to see Garner struggle, this is the number one. I think Kathy Svark is a true stopper and has the ability to really clamp down. And I really rate the. Interestingly enough, if you were to kind of describe them as generically as possible, you'd probably describe Goldsworthy and Ella Roberts in very similar ways.
Yeah.
But even down to the fact that they're kind of thrown around the ground a bit. But to be honest, I just trust the fact that West Coast truly see Ella Roberts as a superstar and want to get her the ball as often as possible. Whereas GWS, I just don't trust their game style nearly as much.
Yeah.
To the point where, as much as there is a big price difference, I think Ella Roberts can consistently put together 70s and 80s. Whereas with Goldsworthy, I think there's every possibility of a 40 because, I don't know, they decide she's a key back.
And we saw Rowbottom as well. If people are like, look at Garner, though, she's averaging, 140 odd or 143. But people looking at that game against Collingwood for Rowbottom last week was it was weird, low scoring, 81 points she scored. And she was still the highest scorer for Gold Coast, and she was, I think, the third highest on the ground. But before that, she went 121, 144. And yes, I know it was against sort of easy opposition, but Bulldogs are a good matchup as well. So I think she could put up another big score this week.
I think she could put up another big score. I think it's going to be unsustainable to get to those 140s because I really think that was one of the most outrageous scoring performances we've seen in a long time. But if my memory serves me correctly, and I'm just double checking it now, but I still think she maintained her Yeah, so her market share was still down last week. So it was down at 8.2, whereas on the season she's been at 10.2 overall, and it was 11.7 and 10.6 in the first two games. So it wasn't her best performance kind of scoring-wise in terms of her market share, but long-term, I still expect her to be above that 10% mark, which I really see as the threshold for being a premium mid, particularly for Gold Coast that have just shown a propensity to score a lot of points.
Yeah.
So on that basis, I think I prefer Rowbottom. And I just think that there's a world where Garner has a bad score this week and she'll move down enough cash to the point where you can consider bringing her in the next few weeks. And there's every world where Garner may score a few less points this week because Bruton is back as well, because Bruton is no midfield slouch. As a third option, and we've also seen the improvement of Mia King, I think there might soon become a bit of a mouths to feed problem at North in the midfield.
Yeah.
All right. Well, made it through.
I just got one sort of question. Sort of, I think a few people might be looking at this as well. Is that who's the defender pick that you're looking at? Like, if you're picking a premium defender, if you can afford anyone, is it still Tani Evans? Is she still top? Is it Daisy Darcy now? Is it a Bresnahan who's gone really well this year? Hannah Priest.
So, it pains me to admit it, but after Tani Evans, I really think it could be Hannah Priest, which would mean that I'm actually saying something positive about St Kilda, but I had a look on Keeper League pod the other evening, and I think it's only something like 8 players who've been named as defenders have CBAs week to week, and by far and away the highest number is Hannah Priest. And it's not like it's, some no-name scrub. She was someone that a lot of people picked to start last year, and she's been pegged for having midfield time before, and has also been someone that, has scored well as a defender. So I really rate long-term, and I think Tani Evans is an absolute gun and a true game changer. And I'm really hoping that it was just they were trying a few unique things to throw Richmond off the scent, because Richmond obviously do really well at defending key defenders, like those impactful defenders. I trust Tani Evans to be D1, but yeah, I think it probably is Hannah Priest.
Daisy Darcy is probably next.
Daisy Darcy, and then it is Emma Carney as well, because I think as well her consistency comes from the fact that she will rack it up when the ball's down there and do just enough when they're doing well to make sure she's always around that 60 to 70 mark. Yep. All right, well, made it through all the teams and a fair few questions. Apologies that we didn't get to all of them this evening, and same for the pod this week as well. I know you've just mentioned them, but Bales, do you want to run through your trades and also possibly your captain picks this week? Or at least what they're at now.
Yeah, so I'll go captains because it's pretty simple for me. I think it's going to stay the exact same for pretty much the whole year. It's Marinoff VC into Bowers. My only red dot is Murphy, and she plays the same time as Gardner, so that sort of rules out any potential VCing with Gardner there. And I think Adelaide could have another big win again against Giants, who have been struggling a little bit. So then, Bowers obviously captain, who I think is going to go big this week. So that's captain picks. In terms of trades, as I said before, I haven't really changed. It's pretty much, it's going Benici down to Ty Smith to get that cash. Going Ash Riddell to, I think it is, as discussing a little bit more, I think it is probably Rowbottom now looking at it. With Becky Webster coming back in, that sort of goes me a bit towards Rowbottom, but I think Chris Parks has got a pretty nice run, so that's sort of, it's 50-50, but at the moment it's probably Rowbottom, and then, the other trade is going Lister up to Daisy Darcy.
Nice. And yes, at the moment I have Riddell going sideways to Rowbottom. I've got Lister going up to Charlie Thomas, and then kind of got to pick a forward trade-in for Lily Postlethwaite. I'm yet to decide if it'll be a red dot or if I might pull something a little bit more interesting than that. I could look at going Amy Mackin, because I do think that she's someone that will have at least some decent job security. Melbourne have shown that they were very happy to stick Bly Mackin in the side last year, and I don't think she actually ever came out and even played in that grand final. So might be a decent amount of cash burn, but I also want to think about whether I can find someone who's a red dot for me, because if I can find a red dot, I will be going VC Gardner into C Bowers, because I'm very much looking forward to having a stab at Laura Gardner as my vice captain, because I should have done it last week. Should have even gone with the C.
Yeah.
It's always very disappointing when you've got, a few players inside the top 5 scorers in the week and they're not even close to your captain choice. That was great.
Well, Laura Gardner's that one. That
Laura
Gardner's that one. It doesn't matter if it's not just the fact that you've got her and that you were so big on in the preseason. She's going miles and miles above what you probably could have even anticipated. So,
yeah, without a doubt. Like, I was expecting 90s,
not 151.
I knew she was good. I was expecting 90s because I was like, oh, she's Abby Mackay, like midfielder in real life, just needs the role. We'll get it eventually, and she can put together decent scores. We've got longer games now. She's second highest scorer in the game.
300 in a row.
And for, and I'm not suggesting I can claim every person that's picked her and whatever, but for those of you who did feel inclined to pick her after listening to the pod, you're welcome. I've ruined my own fantasy championship winning season to some degree as a result. But it really does make it easier watching Sydney games when you're like, oh, well, literally everyone inside the top 100 has her, but fuck, it's good to play. And on that delightful note, we'll end it there. Bales, thanks again very much for joining me this week. It's always a pleasure having you on. And thank you, everyone, who listened live, and all those who are listening back to the recording, which, all things going, will actually be uploaded this week after I don't think we've had nearly as many audio issues.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, enjoy.
Been good tonight. I was just saying, been good tonight. If anyone, again, as usual, wants to chat trades and stuff, I'll be doing the pre-lockout chat tomorrow night, and I don't think you'll be able to jump on then with it being so early, but hopefully in future weeks with the games later, we'll be able to get people on, which will be good. So, yeah, make sure you tune in.
Absolutely, yeah. Fingers crossed. Now that we've got 1 week left of these 505s, and we can move back to a more helpful timeline. All right, everyone, enjoy round 4 of footy, and you'll hear from me next on the podcast next week.
See ya.